Hey, hello everyone, and welcome back for week 2. I just want to remind everyone that the way the course is designed, even though it is an 8-week course in total, each week is also meant to be its own self-standing individual class with its own content. There'll be a couple of skills that we build upon, like, for example, the techniques we used last week in cutting onions, garlic, a little bit of vegetable prep. But those are more like knife skills and culinary preparation pieces. You know, we understand that people have different schedules, and if you can make all the classes, that's outstanding, but just know that we also, each one, if you can pop in for it and stay the full hour, I think it's useful to stay that full hour to see kind of the variety of dishes that we're preparing, especially as we get into the global cuisine. So last week was just sort of an intro to tee things off, and now we are stepping into our first focus on a global cuisine, which is going to be the Colombia and Venezuela. So we chose this for a few different reasons. One is that, of course, there's been a significant number of Venezuelan individuals coming to the United States in the last several years for a variety of reasons. Some are employed in food services, some are employed in other sectors of the economy, but certainly Venezuelan culture and Venezuelan food has become much better known in the US as a result of an increased Venezuelan population. I also had personal experience working with the main dish that we're preparing today, which is the arepas de reina, which means the Queens Arepas. So arepas is basically a small disc-like flattened, fried, and or baked, or a combination of fried and baked disc of masa, which has been filled with something. You can also eat arepas plain, just the masa cake or the masa itself after cooking, but much more commonly you'll stuff something inside it. So the dish that we're making today, the primary dish, is one that I first had. I was coaching my son's baseball team, and there was a kid named Alex on the team who was from Venezuela. His father actually runs a business here in Boulder called Cookie Foods that does Latin American import and export. And at the season-ending barbecue, he brought his father from Venezuela, and they prepared this dish. They actually made it on the grill. They did it on an outdoor grill. So they grilled the arepas, and then they shoved them with a mix of smashed avocado and shredded chicken, which is what makes it the Queens Arepas. It's easy to make that similar version vegetarian, just omit the shredded chicken and smash the avocado, add a touch of lime and salt. And that kind of is that creamy, unctuous, fatty, like middle to the masa cake. So very cool. So that's the main dish we'll be making. We're also going to talk about, ingredient-wise, we're also the plantains. So we have 3 different varieties of plantains that we're going to work with today. So the green plantain, yellow plantain, and then the very ripe or sweet plantain. So that's going to be kind of our ingredient of focus, and that's more of a method. We don't have a printed recipe for that. We'll just show a couple of methods and ways of preparation. And then we are going to finish with the preparation of the pabellón criollo. So it's a stew of rice and stewed black beans, very flavorful, lots of vegetables, super healthy, very economical dish as well. This is probably our most economical menu of the entire session, because everything today that I purchased for this, if you were cooking for, say, a family of 4, you could purchase these ingredients for $10, in the range of $10 to $12 to feed 4 people. So really kind of amazing what you can do, especially with the rice and beans and the masa as the centerpiece and the cornerstones of the dish. So also we have, I'm not sure if he's on the call yet, but we will be joined, if not already, by Chef Pablo, who is from the Hispanic Restaurant Association. Jessica, is Chef Pablo on the call yet? Can you tell?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
I'm on the call.
All right. Hey, Pablo, how are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. Thank you very much for joining us. So just for context, this is only week 2 of the class, and this is our first time we've stepped into actual preparation of complete dishes. Week 1, we focused on kind of, basic food preparation, food safety, some knife skills. And I just am super thankful that you're on the call. We are open to questions throughout the call. If you want to use the chat, they'll go to Jessica, and then she will speak them aloud to either Chef Pablo or myself. And what Chef Pablo can provide is a much greater context and deep historical context from his own personal experience as a chef within Colombian cuisine and he, I'm sure, can also speak to Venezuelan cuisine as well, and maybe some of the differences or similarities between the two. So, Chef Pablo, could you give yourself a quick intro to the group here?
Letters, so once you follow the whole steps of food all the way when it's into the plate, it's what makes me really intrigued about food and why I do the things I do. I like to be a part of the whole chain of food. I have traveled. I'm a Colombian chef. I have traveled through the whole of Mexico. I used to be the executive chef and producer for TV Azteca. And I am the chef for the Hispanic Restaurant Association. And I'm stoked to give you a hand on anything you guys might need, The goal of the Hispanic Restaurant Association is to make our community, which it's more than, let's say, 60%, 70% of the back of the restaurants is made from Hispanic cooks, So we need to educate and elevate them to make them more successful within their futures. That's the reason why we do what we do. And aside from that, I just do the things that I do for pure love of food. I like to eat well, and I like to know where my food comes from.
Great. Thank you so much. And for the audience, if you're interested in the Hispanic Restaurant Association, we can share links through Jessica after, so you can kind of explore a little more and understand a little more about the mission and some of the work that they're doing. So thank you, Chef. Jessica, could we change to the overhead view? Because I'm going to do just the quick nutrition focus of the day. So each week we'll be having a nutrition focus. It should be just a brief session at the beginning to talk about one ingredient or perhaps a class of ingredients and some of the health benefits that we know through research and the scientific basis of why these foods are good for us. A lot of them may be traditional foods. They may be foods that are eaten in great abundance around the world, and beans is one of those. So we're working with black beans today for our dish. And so there were two options. You could always work with dried beans or a canned bean. The dried beans, it certainly helps if you have a pressure cooker. I cooked the dried beans that we're using later for 1 hour in the pressure cooker. And I was able to get them to a nice softness like you would experience with the can. Because essentially at the industrial level, they're pressure cooking these as well in mass. These are a few herbs and spices that go well with beans or that naturally pair well with beans. We'll add some of these today. Some are in the recipe, some are not, but you can use to your preference. Chili powder, paprika, cumin, and red chili flakes. So these are kind of some of the main spices and seasoning that I often use with beans. So on the nutrition side with black beans, we know that they are high in antioxidants, as are most beans. They have also been shown to be protective against cancers. If you are, again, in that pre-diabetic realm or know someone with type 2 diabetes, they have been shown to decrease insulin resistance in cells. So that is one way they can help moderate blood sugar, as well as the fiber content of the bean, which can also regulate the blood sugar and create a lower glycemic index. They are also high in potassium. A lot of people, if they're cramping or they think about potassium, they only think banana. But beans are actually very high in potassium, especially black beans. So that's kind of the nutrition corner to start us out. Now with today's dish, the main dish, which I mentioned, the arepas de reina, the one I had learned from my friend Alex, is I just want to show kind of the finished product or where we're going with it. So I prepared several already. What we have here, if you can see, is I just did a side salad with it. And these are the arepas themselves. So they're a little dried out because they've been sitting for a little while, but this is the arepas itself. And then I stuffed them with avocado, lime, salt, black pepper, and shredded chicken. So again, you could easily just remove the shredded chicken and make this a vegetarian dish as well. But this is what we're making today. So we're going to focus on first dishes with the arepas. And again, I encourage anyone who's on the call to please ask questions as we go. We encourage ongoing questions through the chat. And then we'll get to them once we have time and we kind of find a natural spot to ask those questions. So
arepas, I think, is the not arepas. I think corn is what makes the whole Latin America and the whole Mesoamerica all together friends, you know, like the arepa could be the same thing as a sope or a gordita. In Venezuela, Colombia, we all use the corn. So I think the three crops that makes us what we are, it is the three Marias, as they call here in America, which is the corn, beans, and pumpkins growing all together, you know. The corn by itself on any kind of cake that we use, it's to bring the other flavors together, but it's a solid base for everything we eat. We depend on arepas for breakfast in Colombia, like 30 or 40% of the population.
And what would you put in a breakfast arepa, or what might you stuff or put inside the arepas?
It depends on the region of Colombia, because there is over 50 or 60 different types of arepas. So there are arepas de maíz pelado, there are arepas santanderiana, there is arepa paisa, and it changes according to the type of grain you have. So let's say Colombia is rich on really, really biodiversity of species. So we have a lot of corn. Everywhere you walk, it's a different type of corn. In Antioquia, we use, for example, the white corn called peto. And this is used to make arepas. It's really close to the one that you see here on pozole. The arepas are made in Antioquia. They are just really thin. Probably
more like a thick tortilla, like a. Oh, I think we lost you for now.
Charcoal. You put butter, and that's it. You can put some cheese on it, the eggs on top, or whatever you want to use it as a carrier for other toppings. But if you do it with butter and salt, that's just really good as it is, you know.
Gotcha.
But the ones known to stuff the arepas are the Venezuelans, more than the Colombians itself. So we do it different types of arepas, but even stuff with eggs. So if you go to Cartagena and you have a arepa, you can have an egg inside of the arepa. But the ones that are really known for, like the Reina Pepiadas and all these type of stuffed arepas, I think this is more Venezuelan than Colombian.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Yep. But either way, it's incredibly versatile is what I'm hearing. You could have it for any meal of the day with any flavoring or additions that you like. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little. So this is just one cookbook of many, but masa has kind of, I think, grown a lot in culinary popularity, the kind of recognition of masa, the quality of the masa. Today, I'm just using kind of the base level maseca that you can find at most grocery stores, including King Soopers and many other smaller groceries. So I'm just using this one. A lot of the masa is also gluten-free. It should say on the label for sure if it's verified gluten-free, but most is. It naturally is. So a cookbook like this can give you some new and different ideas, but it's an ancient ingredient that I think has come to be a little bit more recognized for what it is and for the quality of what you can produce with it. So what I'm going to do here is, this is again a method. We're going to talk a little about the texture. I'm adding just a drizzle of oil, vegetable oil, a hefty pinch of salt. And again, this is one of those things, the recipe itself says 2 cups, but you kind of go by feel after you've made these a certain period of time. We'll talk about some of the characteristics that we're going to look for as we look for that ideal texture. I think the recipe actually does a good job of explaining. It says you want to be able to make a cake, and if the edges start to crack, it's a little too dry. So you want to be able to make a smooth, continuous cake. This water is room temperature. It says warm water. You can use, the temperature of the water I don't think has too significant. It's more the ratio of the water to the masa. I tend to squeeze it pretty hard. Like I like kind of seeing, once I start to see my knuckles, kind of the inside shape of your hands, you can start to come together. Then I start adding the water a little more slowly. but no big deal, right? If you have the masa, if you have enough masa, you have enough water, you can just, keep adding a little. That's how you end up with more and more. That's how you end up with arepas, and then you invite your friends over because you made more masa than you thought. Again, you could do this in small quantity, large quantity. You could just make just enough to make a couple of arepas. So it's really up to you. So another nice thing about it. And the masa keeps for a very long time. It should keep well in your cupboard as long as it's dry and free of insects. So
we make big batches when we make like for the houses in Colombia. You make a big batch and then you freeze it.
Freeze them.
Uh-huh.
Or do you
When
just
they're
freeze
from corn itself, not from the masas. But when you meal the corn at home, it's way better. But it's the same thing. It's like making it from scratch. It takes too much time. So
right. So I'm forming the patty. I like where we're going. I think it's still a little dry. I can see some cracking at the edges. So I'm just gonna add a touch more water, and then I'll form a few, and we're gonna go cook them using that shallow fry method that we used last week with the tofu. And we're just gonna fry up a couple of these so you can see kind of the color and method on the fry. Again, thickness, you could make them thinner, you can make them thicker. It's really up to you and what you want to do with them. I'm gonna go a little bit thinner today because it'll work better for our fry on the stovetop. I like this. I like the texture. I like how it feels in the hand. I like kind of the smoothness of the edges. I'm feeling good about this, so just set that aside. Salt, up to you how much salt you want to add. It's really a matter of taste. You could always add less salt, and then your customer or your guest could decide if they want to add additional salt, which is kind of generally the way I would go with something like this. So also keep in mind, if you have a salty filling, like if you prepare the salty filling with avocado, then you're going to have some salt from that as well. All right, we're just going to fry 2 of these. I just have a small pan. I don't want to crowd it too much. The recipe states that you want to shallow fry the arepas, and that then you would put them in the oven. We're not going to do that just for the demo's sake, but these are a little thinner. If you made a thicker one, certainly you could start it on the stovetop and then move it to the oven. So I'm going to move to the stove over here. Again, I also want to make sure if you have questions regarding equipment or ingredients or things that you're not sure if you have in your own kitchen, ask those things because usually there's an alternate method or a different way to prepare. So I have a paper towel and a plate ready to set up in case there's excess oil. I'm going to cook this at what I would call a medium to medium high heat. We're going to use a simple clear vegetable oil. So something that can maintain or take a high smoke point, meaning we do want to get it quite hot in the pan, but not have it light on fire or smoke. So I'm going to add just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. Again, shallow fry.
And we do have a question about the oil, Stephen. So the question is, why do you use oil with the masa? Is it because of the altitude?
Oh, adding a touch of oil. Well, so I don't know. I would say that's a matter of preference. I'll ask for Chef Pablo's input too, but in this recipe, I think it lends a little bit more moisture to the cakes themselves because there's a little bit of oil and fat inside the masa. Okay. But go ahead.
Steven, and like I said at the beginning, there is over 100 different recipes of arepas. So you're really doing a fried arepa. There is grilled arepas. There is many ways to prepare them, you know? Usually add some oil into the masses to add some flexibility also.
So they're not as likely to break or crack.
Yeah.
Nice. So as with the shallow frying we did with the tofu last week, these are a little drier than the tofu. The tofu is a little wetter even with pressed. But what you want to see and visually is the small bubbles just start to form around the edge. I think you can probably see that through the camera there. Just a small bubbling. You don't want any spitting. You don't want it like smoking. So try and moderate your heat. We're going to allow these about, I don't know, 45 seconds to a minute here on this side, and then we'll just have a look at them. What we want is a golden brown crust. so that there's at least some variation of texture and it doesn't all have the same consistency. So I have a wooden spoon here. It's a hard spoon, but it's a wooden spoon, and I just use something like this, or maybe something like this. You could use another type, really any type of spatula, but something that's a little bit gentle. I wouldn't say to use tongs or something like that because it could break it up or hard to work with, but use some sort of spatula, either wooden or metal, to get underneath and have a look. We're not there yet. Well, I'm guessing you can see it cooking and you can hear it cooking. You just can't smell it cooking, but it has a nice, like a earthy smell, right? It's just a familiar smell. If you've had, yeah, handmade tortillas, homemade tamales, like it all is the same vein, and you know, nothing new under the sun. Like Chef mentioned, if you think about it with masa, it's probably been done, or if not, someone's tried it before. So. All right, we're close. Increase the heat a little bit. This one's starting to crack. You can see that crack down the center, which tells me it's a little bit dry. I should have spent a little bit more time either mixing it, making sure it was even, or just more moisture, but we're okay with it. You can always add more moisture after the fact with the fillings, right? Oops, there it goes. It cracked in half. This one looks better. I think what it was, I didn't spend enough time mixing evenly, so some had more moisture than others, but. Okay, so while these bubble away, I'm gonna put that on a lower heat, and we're gonna go back to the other side and make the filling for the arepas. The arepas, which is this variation. So what I've done here, a little word on avocados. So I worked long ago in the city of Chicago with a chef named Chef Lisa. She was a great person and a wonderful mentor of mine, just a very food person. And we would always debate, you know, how do you make guacamole? Some of you may have had this thought when entertaining in the summer. How do you make guacamole without having it go brown, or without having it go down brown quickly? And this is the method she showed me that I still use. Some people say you add the pit, you add lime, you add whatever. But for me, this method has always worked, which is to prepare a small basin of warm water with salt, enough salt so that it tastes like seawater, like a pretty salty mix. You can then let the avocados soak in there for anywhere from an hour to even overnight. They do get a little bit of water. They take on a touch of water, but then if you drain this water off and dry them, then when you make the guacamole, it will have a lasting, it will, in my experience, keep the color much, much better and not go brown. So there's our, just drain those off. I'm just gonna smash these with a fork. I have the chicken that I'm using for this dish is a chicken breast. It was one of those giant chicken breasts where you wonder, like, where are these chickens coming from? But a lot of chicken came off the breast. I'm shredding it quite finely to shred the meat. I boiled the breast, but you could also bake or otherwise prepare the breast. And so I'm just smashing the avocado, smashing in a little lime and salt, and then adding the shredded chicken. So again, I have a special kind of memory of this, with this being the first type of arepas I tried. And it's just, for me, still really enduring. Really nice dish because you have that exterior masa, which should be a little crispy, but soft and filling. And then with this nice kind of delicious savory mix in the middle. So I left the other arepas fine. I didn't like that one as much. It started to break up on me. So this one I feel good about. It's crisp. It held together. It's thick enough that we can make a slice and still fill it. So I'm going to take a sharp edge of a knife and just, ideally, you're kind of making a pocket, just making a space. Sometimes it may come apart or you may end up just having the arepa. But you create a pocket like so. It's still warm. Oops. And you're creating almost like a little mini sandwich, right? Like so. All right. I'm going to stop for a minute and we're going to go to Chef's Corner and talk just about the arepas process that we just completed and see if there's any questions on that recipe or ingredients. All right, back in Chef's Corner. Now's the time to ask questions of Chef Pablo or myself. And go ahead.
In my experience, there is two ways of making arepas. Okay, so you can use the corn, and you just cook it, and straight make the paste, or like Mexicans do also. They call a process called nixtamalization. So in nixtamalization process is when you use limestone to cook the corn and change the molecular composition of the corn. So you change the enzymes on the corn and the corn becomes more digestible. In Colombia, we use both textures as well. So it depends what you want to do with the corn, which is your main ingredient. It will allow you to play different ways. So the nixtamalization works for many things as well. It also allows the corn not to break and be easier to fold when you do in the tortillas because it doesn't have all the skin. It has most the insides. Once you spread those arepas on those two kinds, then you see two different ingredients because they behave completely different, but they are the same. They're coming from the same plant. The same plant can do both ingredients, you know. So once you cook them, once without limestone, one with and one without, you can see the two different textures that you achieve, and that opens your world on a bigger spectrum when it comes to making arepas.
And we did have two questions come in from some viewers. The first one is, how do you know when the arepa is done cooking?
So in my case, I was just shallow frying it. I made them a little thinner than I've had them in the past. And so when I cut into it, I could really tell, but I could tell that right through the center, it was warm, it was moist, it had kind of like a moist look to it. There was no dryness. If you break one open or you crack one in half like the one that I broke, and you see a dryness or like a dry middle, that's not good, right? You want to have it a little more like a fully cooked, kind of a moist cooked feel or cooked look and taste.
And the other question, or we have a few. How do you keep chicken meat moist?
Well, good question. In my case, well, I guess the number one I would say would be don't overcook it, right? Don't cook it for too long, because even if you boil something for too long,
165 degrees is what it's called for chicken to be cooked at. Once you start going above those points, then you start losing water and the chicken starts drying up. And there is parts of the chicken which hold more moist than others, like we're talking about specifically of the breast, I assume, but if you don't know to overcook it, I think you should be okay. Yeah.
Right. What Chef Pablo was talking about is the food safety element, which is you want to cook chicken at 165, but a lot of people, out of fear of contamination or food safety, might cook it to 200 or just keep going with it to make it safer, but that can also be the way to make it drier.
And then can you use baking powder when grilling the arepas?
baking powder to make them like puff, I assume. I would say why not? You try it. I've never tried it, but I don't see why not. You could try it and see if it adds a little more levity or lightness.
Yeah, and I think you might have mentioned something similar to this, but can you let the masa rest covered with plastic so it won't break?
Yes, and ideally, yes, a moist towel. Ideally, I would have had a little more sit time than what I showed in the recipe. It says that just let it sit for at least 5 or 10 minutes with either a moist towel or plastic wrap or some sort of way to keep the moisture in.
And can you add herbs or anything to flavor them? I think this might be in the masa, but it might just be as a topping as well.
Yeah, again, I would say back to what Pablo said, there's 75 to 100 or to who knows how many types of arepas. So if you can throw, I don't see why you couldn't throw chopped herbs into the
So
mix.
there is a really good and fun one in Colombia. We put the corn and then we shred chicharrón, like pork skin, and then you put the chicharrón inside of the masa, and then you form the cakes. That's delicious. But yes, you can put toppings inside the dough. You can put the cheese in the dough also. So you got arepa y queso.
Right. You could probably do bacon, you could do cheddar, anything with flavor and a little bit of fat would probably do well.
Yeah.
Yeah, sky's the limit. So, okay, we're gonna step on and I'm gonna talk a little bit about our next ingredient focus, which is plantains. Again, there's no specific recipe that we included this week, but we just wanted to show and talk a little bit more about some methods. So, Jessica, if we can go back to the overhead, I pulled out and grabbed 3 of the types of plantains that are the primary ones that we talk about. The green, what you could call yellow, or this is a little past yellow, and then like the sweet dolce or the black plantain. So Pablo, do you have anything to say about like the different uses of plantains specifically in Colombian or Venezuelan
They're
cuisine?
all fantastic. We depend on plantain. So we are in the coast, in the Caribbean coast of South America. So we have plantains like no other. And we use them on soups. We use them for fries, on rice. We use plantains on everything that we have on our Colombian gastronomy. I'm not into the sweet foods, although I like them very much. But if you make me have a sweet plantain or a plátano macho, I will take the non-ripe one, the green plantain, and then you fry it twice, and then you make like a cracker. Oh, that's delicious. My wife, in the other hand, likes the sweet plantains, so she could have a whole bunch of plantains like there is no tomorrow. And when it goes really, really, really into the ripe side, like really, really, really ripe, we cook those in the oven with bocadillo. So bocadillo is a guava paste, like ate de membrillo, and we stuff it with cheese, and that's called an aborrajado. That thing is delicious.
So would you split this, put something inside and then bake it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes, okay. Yes. You open that in the middle. You leave the skin on, so it'll help you protect and get some moist on. Mm-hmm. And then you put bocadillo, which is the guava paste, with cheese, and then you bring that to an oven, and you're happy.
Yeah. Well, good. So I pre-prepared and made a few of these different types. So I actually have a plate here that kind of shows some of these different preparations because I used the different types, the slightly different preparations. So this is kind of, again, I did not have a deep fryer. No, I did not deep fry these, but this is an example of what would be, if I crisped it up more, if it was in a deep fryer, it would be more of a crispy chip, almost like a plantain chip, but not very sweet, right? These came from the greener plantain. So more like a tostone or something like that, where it's just, or tostone would be twice smashed, but same idea. So not a very sweet, but this, I always encourage people to think more with the green plantain, think more of it as like a potato or a starchy vegetable as opposed to a banana. It's not really a banana, and it's definitely not sweet. It has more of the starch. So that has potential. You could also bake that as well. Like a potato, use it with more starch. You could cube it and put it in stews. There's so much you can do with this. Again, mostly what I want everyone to take away from today is the versatility of the plantains and what you can do, right? So I also made these. These again were not deep fried, but in Chicago, this is an interesting dish that I became familiar with, where you take a yellow or medium plantain, smash it, and then fry it. So imagine this like deep fried and crispy. And this becomes the bread for a sandwich, a Puerto Rican sandwich that was invented in Chicago called the jibarito sandwich. So imagine you put meat, cheese, lettuce, tomato, something like that, and you put another plantain on top. You're basically using the plantain, smashed plantain, as the bread. So that's kind of a cool sandwich you can look up called the jibarito. It's kind of a Chicago specialty that evolved from Puerto Ricans in Chicago. So a lesser known dish. And then the sweeter ones here, the more dessert-like ones, which you may be familiar with, these would be like more commonly served in a US restaurant, for example, because it has more of a sweet flavor that people associate like a banana or like a cooked banana. Sometimes you could add rum and flame it up, the kind of the rum piece. You could do a lot with the sweet, but this would usually here in the States be more of a dessert. Oh, and here's another one of the greens. That was a green that I cooked off. I just cooked off at a high heat in the skin, peeled it, and then this was like a halved version of that. So again, lots of different potential, each with a different composition of starch and sugars, but all really healthy. It's a vegetable with fiber, lots of vitamins and minerals, much like any vegetable or fruit. And so yeah, I encourage you to play around and experiment a bit with this. There's great YouTube tutorials on how to cook the different varieties, how to identify what you want for a certain recipe, and I think it's just there's a whole world to explore just within plantains. Do you agree, Pablo?
Plantains are the base of my Colombian cuisine. They're really versatile. Like from soups to bread.
Yeah. So any questions on plantains while we have those up? You use the term macho. You said plátanos macho. Which one would be the macho? Is that on the sweeter side?
The plátano macho should be the green plantain.
The green. Okay.
Yeah, the greener.
So more starch, more of a sturdy.
More starchy. Yeah. That's the one I like the most.
Okay.
And that you can leave it really, really thin and crispy. That's delicious.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone has any questions on plantains, feel free to fire those away. I'm just going to reset the board here, and we're going to prepare the vegetables for the black beans dish. Oh, actually, while I prepare the board for this, Chef, I did bring some yuca. We're not going to focus on yuca today because it wasn't really part of the plan, but I did want to talk a little bit about yuca and cassava, and wondered if you had any insight into some of the uses for this.
I mean, yuca, you're going to the full core of what we are, Then you go to the outlands of Colombia. So you have yuca, and there is different types of it. There is one that is poisonous, and there is another one that it's just really, really, really good to eat as a root. We use it on every single way too. We fry it, we cook it on stews, we make breads out of it. So if you use the starch from the yuca, you get the tapioca. Yuca is also really versatile. It's what has fed the Latin American community within the coast regions for thousands of years, It is creamy, but it could be also
So I'll just do one quick culinary piece. You faded a little bit, Pablo. So as far as the cooking or preparation of it, we're not going to cook this today.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. if you drink Fiji water has an element called silica. So silica doesn't allow you to close your teeth when you're chewing right away. So it's like having water with a bite, you know? The same thing happens with the yuca starch. So like you bite, but then you bite more because of the same starch. It gives you like a weird texture.
Good. Yeah, totally weird texture. Especially you have to cook it some way, right? You're not going to eat this raw. So I would say
you cook it first, and then you cook it first, and then you can play with it in many ways.
Right. So just in terms of advice for those at home, if you've never worked with yuca and if you'd like to try it, don't choose your nicest knife. Don't choose your thinnest knife. Choose your sturdier knife that's thicker, so you don't damage. You can easily damage a knife trying to cut something like yuca. Then what I did is I just break it down into pieces that are manageable, 3 or 4 inches each. I put it up. I kind of set it on its side or end, and then I just go around like you might cut other fruits that have a hard skin, like a pineapple or other things, and just remove that skin. Discard that. And then the most common size that you see here, like if you see fried yuca, which I think is the most common restaurant version of yuca that we see here, would be something like this. And you might have yuca sticks, something like that, almost like carrot sticks. You could do longer.
The quality of the yuca comes when it has less sticks on it. So it's got fibers that goes all the way through. The least amount of fiber that the yuca has, the better quality it is. And the easier it is for you to cook it.
Yeah, and what I would have done if we had a little more time today would be I would have boiled this. So what I would do is just boil it until, as they say, it's cooked, fully cooked, but not falling apart. So the piece still has like integrity, and then fried the pieces, the boiled pieces. That's the most common way I've seen it here.
When I do those, I like to overcook them, like to the point when they're always going to melt. And then I will freeze them and deep fry them.
Like in pieces, kind of whatever pieces it ends up.
When yuca it's part cooked, it takes another 15 minutes to be overcooked. And for that yuca that just melts on your mouth, it needs to be overcooked. If you want a really, really crunchy, crispy yuca. Otherwise, so it could be hard for you.
So what I'm hearing from you is when you think it's done, cook it more.
Yes.
Okay.
And then if you think that it's mushy, that's the point. A little bit under when it's gonna start melting, you know.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to move on in the sake of time. I'm just going to review a couple quick things that we did last week. This is just going to be some of the flavoring agents we add to the rice and beans that we're making today. The rice and beans recipe, it also had an additional piece where you could boil flank steak, and you could do flank steak in addition to as like a side for the rice and beans, but I kept it vegetarian today, both for cost and kind of simplicity, and we're also making the arepas as well. So we're just gonna take the garlic as we did last week, keep it in a small pile and mince it. Just pass your knife through several times. We're gonna get to what we want to call a mince, where it'll start sticking to your knife, but just push it aside. Sometimes people, if they want to really break down the garlic more, might add a little pinch of kosher salt. We never talked about that last week, but it's an option. It can help kind of break down the cell wall of the garlic a little faster and kind of make it more of like a paste. So we'll just do one large garlic clove. The onion, if those of you that were here last week, just gonna lose that end. It was looking kind of nasty. We already had peeled this onion, so I just left the root end, as we call it. So we're gonna cut that in half, and we're gonna do roughly like a medium dice, we'll call it. So we're gonna pass the knife, or the technique, we studied and tried last week. Go around in about 1/2 inch shapes in kind of a rainbow, and then pass down. Actually, we'll just do 1/2 an onion since we don't have a ton of beans here. And we're also doing a red pepper for the first time today. We didn't do peppers last week, so I just wanted to show kind of a basic breakdown of the pepper to get to like a medium dice-ish, which is what we were shooting for last week. So I generally there's many ways to cut a pepper, but I generally take the top and the tail to give myself kind of a flat piece. You're then left with these 2 rings, which are a little imperfect, so I usually leave those for last. But the main piece, you can just take off the seeds. I cut down once, just 1 strip, open it up. It's nice to lay flat. You can see what you're doing. You can get any remaining seeds with the side of your knife. And then if we're going for really nice small 1/2 inch squares, like the medium dice, then it's much easier to do with a rectangular shaped pepper, okay? And it also keeps it from getting a bunch of different pieces all over your board. So then I'll take this. I'll start with, again, the easier cut. Cut this in half for a little easier working. Go roughly 1/2 inch slices, and then across. Okay, like that. Do the same with this. You could absolutely use green pepper, yellow pepper, orange pepper, whatever. I mean, green pepper is cheaper, so that's often the go-to, but you could use any type of pepper. You could also do jalapeno, serrano if you want spice. Add something else. So, and then these 2 pieces, you just kind of do it the best you can to get a rectangular shape that's similar to these. They're never going to be quite as perfect as these, but you know, perfection is not typically the goal of the home cook. It's usually more get dinner on the table because people are hungry. So we're doing that now. All right, there's your pepper. So that's 1 pepper broken down. If you practice that, you do that a few times, you start to get comfortable, you're going to find how quickly and easily you can break down peppers and onions, and how quickly you can get things ready and prepped to start your dish. Another tip is you could do this the night before, right? If you have a complex recipe, you know it's going to take some time, you know you don't have a lot of time, you can always prep this the night before, throw it in a Ziploc bag, throw it in a container, and you're good to go the next day. So I'm going to move back to the stove, Jessica, so I'm going to go. All right, I'm going to show you a little bit about what we're doing with the beans and the rice that we have on top. I have a big pot of bubbling black beans that I already cooked in the pressure cooker. This is the pressure cooker unit. I advise if you don't have one, try to get a hold of one. They're just outstanding. It saves you time, it saves you energy, it keeps the nutrients in the dish. You know, you can set it and forget it in the morning for a stew type of dish. So I cooked the black beans in here first for 1 hour on high pressure from dry. So I didn't even soak them. Now they're just bubbling away with a little liquid. I now then cook the rice. I just flip this and cook the rice in the pressure cooker as well. Super fast, super easy. So these 2 things have been bubbling away while we work. All right, so I'm gonna crank this stove here. I don't know about you all, but I have like the one stove burner that's hot. It's a little bit hotter than the rest, so they all kind of look the same, but this is my hot one. So I'm just gonna throw these in. I'm only gonna kind of quick cook the onions and garlic and peppers, just kind of get them frying, get them started, get a little bit of color on them, and then I'm gonna add them to the beans and let them stew or simmer for a while in there, and we're done. So just a touch of oil again, shallow fry. Go with the onions and garlic first. Sizzling already, that's a good sign. All right, and while I cook, this is gonna be the last dish we put together, so I'm putting together this black beans and rice dish. I'll plate this up and we can show it over there, but we all only have about 10 minutes left here with Chef Pablo, one of the foremost experts on Latin cuisine, especially of Colombia. And if you have questions, I think now's the time. So my onions and garlic are good. They're starting to get translucent and a little color, so I'm adding the peppers. I'm adding a hefty pinch of cumin, cumino molido. Nice. Goes great with beans. Goes great with almost everything. There's a small percentage of people that don't like cumin, and certainly you can add too much, but most people seem to like the cumin as long as it's a subtle flavor within the dish.
Okay, we have a question. Can you add anything to the black beans as they cook, such as ham or garlic or anything of that sort?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, traditional American South preparation would be adding smoked ham, like a smoked ham piece, neck, bone, to add that flavor. You can also use a smoked paprika if you like that smoky flavor, but from a vegetarian source. If you get the Spanish smoked paprika as opposed to the mild paprika, that can add a similar smokiness that you might get from the meat. But certainly you could add any type of meat. You could add a piece of like a beef bone, anything where you could strip off little bits, little tender bits of meat, I think would be great.
A lot of preparations that we do on the beans and stews, we use the ham hooks, like the picky.
Another question, could you use oregano instead of cumin?
I would say they're very different. I would say very different flavors. You could use a little bit of each and see how that goes. You could just use oregano. You could use epazote, the Mexican oregano, as it's sometimes called, if you can get a hold of epazote. Yeah, that's just a matter of taste. But I would say maybe an interesting way to approach it would be add a little cumin and a little oregano, unless you don't like cumin at all, in which case, of course, skip it. And again, I want to remind you, as I played up this last dish, these are also all good options, like I said, to kind of play with. This is, think of it more like this is your spice palette with beans, and you play with it and see what you like, right? So crushed red pepper, kind of a subtle heat, right? Chili powder, just like an American chili powder, appeals to some people's tastes because it's familiar. It's, you know, chili-like. Regular paprika, so ground Hungarian paprika, which has a fairly mild taste, to be honest. You could add a fair amount of this paprika and not have a significant taste. It will definitely increase the color and a bit of depth of flavor, but the smoked paprika will be much more powerful, so you want to be more careful with how much you add. So those are kind of some of the other things you could put in your palette, you could say, for this dish. All right, I'm gonna plate this up right now. I just got a big pile of rice and got these beans. Are super delicious. The other thing that pressure cooker does, it just makes the beans softer. Like, it just gets them really, really soft. And put a little olive oil on top. Extra flavor. You could do chopped cilantro, chopped parsley on top of this. And I'm gonna go back over to the overhead cam now. Okay, so hopefully the time together today has at least made you hungry for dinner, whether or not you were cooking along. So again, we covered a lot of things, right? We've talked about plantains multiple ways. We talked about yuca, a little bit of basic preparation of yuca. We've got a lot of good, deep, kind of more historical pieces. We've learned that arepas, you can make kind of whatever you want, however you want, because for every type of craving or, you know, meal of the day, it sounds like there's an arepas that could fit it. So you could definitely like play with arepas and look at even using them for different meals of the day. So I had never thought of arepas for breakfast, but now I'm going to try an arepas with butter and cinnamon sugar and see how that goes.
I'll invite you one of these days for our breakfast with arepas.
Okay. Yes, sir. Well, thank you. You've done us a tremendous favor being here today, Pablo. Thank you. We have 5
No, no.
minutes left. Any final questions before we bounce here? And then I'm just going to preview next week's session. We're going to be doing foods from the Indian subcontinent. So meaning foods from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, kind of talk about that region. And then cook some really, really outstanding vegetarian, primarily vegetarian Indian dishes. Again, there will be meat options, or there's certainly options to add meat, but for this course, a lot of times we'll focus on a vegetarian recipe, and then we can talk about what type of meat might enhance the dish or could add to it. So yeah, thank you all very much for attending. Please tell your friends, please let people know about this resource, and yeah, we'll look forward to seeing everyone next week. Thank you, Chef Pablo. Really appreciate you.
It's a real pleasure.
Thank you everyone for your participation. See you next week.
Thank you for everything.